This is the Vivo X100 Ultra, a China exclusive phone that has a 200 megapixel 3.7 optical telephoto zoom, which is the most megapixels you can get in any telephoto zoom. So the camera is naturally the standout feature here, but I spent enough time with this phone to realize it has more to offer than just a camera, even if Vivo do say that this is a camera that can make calls. We will get to that camera, but there are a few things about this phone that I really like. One of those is its battery. It has a 5500 mAh battery, which puts it alongside the likes of things like the Honor Magic 6 Pro. But what I noticed is that the battery actually is really impressive with the time that I had to play with it. I was getting about 2 days of use on a single charge if I wasn't constantly taking photos and videos and just using it as you would like your everyday phone. And any phone that makes me not have to think about charging it every single night when I go to bed is already an instant win. But if you do need to charge it, then it has 80-watt wired charging with its power adapter in the box, and if you like to do wireless charging, then it also does 30-watt wireless charging. The display of the X100 Ultra is also, it's really nice. It's a 6.7-inch 120Hz display, which has a peak brightness of 3000 nits, and it also supports Dolby Vision. I have to say though that the viewing angles I noticed tend not be the best, but if you get it right, then the content in the pictures and anything else you want to do with this display is great. Because of that peak brightness that I mentioned at 3000 nits, when you're using this outside in direct sunlight, the display is really easy to see because it's big, it's bold, it's bright, and I've not had any problems with it outside. If I have a complaint about the display, it'll be that it's not a flat display. I think these are the way forward, and this is kind of like a half-baked curved display where it's not fully curved, and actually, if anything, it does look a little bit dated compared to what we have on other major phones. The design of the whole phone though, I think might not be for everybody, but there are parts about this that I really like. The back of the phone has a really nice frosted back texture which just feels excellent, even with this crack when I did drop it. There's a small curve on the bottom of the phone where the USB port is, and it's a really small touch, but I think it's really cool. And then you see that camera design, because you can't miss it. Genuinely, it's huge. That circular camera design stands out by a mile when you have a look at this phone, and it's probably its biggest feature. It houses those 3 cameras, so your ultra wide, the main, and the telephoto, which we'll get to in a minute, but I'm starting to really like these unusual camera designs. It also has that Zeiss T-Star coating to try and eliminate any sort of glare when you're taking photos and videos, and it does a really decent job. I feel like it's nice to see something a little bit different and a little bit bold, and this is exactly what this camera design is, and from a mile away, it's a Vivo phone. Okay, let's talk about the phone's biggest selling points, and it is the cameras, but more specifically that 3.7 times telephoto camera. This could easily be the best telephoto camera that I've ever used. Before you use that camera, you get to pick between 3 color profiles for taking those pictures, so vivid, textured, and Zeiss natural. All the pictures just seem to hit, and I mean, it's not too saturated. It looks really close to real life, and if you have a look at it a little bit closer, the highlights and the lowlights are captured so well, and when you move into low light, it stands out again. It's not noisy, and it does a really good job here. I struggle to complain about any of the photos on that telephoto camera that I took with the X100 Ultra. I'm really impressed with these. Of course, 3.7 times is the optical zoom, but when you go beyond that optical zoom and you start to get into the digital zoom, the photos, again, they don't look too bad when you get to around about 30 times zoom. After 30 times zoom, it does seem to struggle just a little bit, but it still captures some really decent detail considering you're using that digital zoom. And actually, you can compare a few photos here side by side with the Galaxy S24 Ultra, and I just don't think there's a question about which photos look better, especially when you start to zoom in beyond that 30-40 times. The Vivo keeps so much more detail in the photos, whereas the S24 Ultra tends to lose a lot of that detail, and at 100 times zoom, there is no argument about which of these phones does a better job here. And I have to say, no matter what phone you use when you're taking 100 time photos, they're not going to look great, but the Vivo 100 Ultra does a nice job here, and they're almost usable. There is one part of this camera that I've not mentioned yet, and it is my absolute favorite, and it is taking the macro photos. I don't know if I've ever used a phone that can take better macro photos than this can, and the only reason these photos aren't better that you're seeing on screen is because I've got a really unsteady hand, but the details it captures are so impressive. I can see those like individual hairs on a goose and the water droplets on its back. I can see the sadness in the pigeon's eyes, and it took me ages to find a photo of some insects and flies, but when you can just see so much detail, and I'm kind of blown away by how good this is. I know it's a pretty niche feature, and will I use it more beyond testing for this video? I don't actually know, but I love that it's there. There's loads of features baked into the video and the camera app here, and you really do just need to play around with it. But there's one where you can take 3D pictures. So what it will do is help you create stereoscopic pictures. And I honestly think Vivo might have been right here when they called this a professional camera that can make calls. I'll touch on the video really quickly, and it's nothing stand out, but what it can do, we get 4K at 120 FPS, which is nothing new. We've seen it before, but it's nice this time that it extends that telephoto camera. And now there's a nice option of switching to Dolby Vision if you want to shoot in that, and that does 4K at 60 FPS. There are other modes such as cinematic portrait video, which will automatically focus on faces, and we've seen this before on things like the iPhone and on the Pixel. However, it's not great at focusing on those faces. I kind of found that sometimes it would just lose focus. And Vivo's Super Steady or Action Cam style mode has now upped its resolution to 2.8K at 60 FPS as well. And when it comes to stabilization, I've noticed that stabilization overall is actually not too bad, except when you seem to be panning with the video, that's when it becomes a little bit jittery. And we've had this problem before on Vivo phones, and it still is here now. So I'm not quite sure what is going on with that, but that is letting the video down ever so slightly. Overall, the Vivo X100 Ultra is a really strong phone. It does have Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, which seems like a bit of a strange move because Gen 4 isn't that far away, but Vivo are backing this to hold up and have the power it needs to compete. Although Origin OS really does try its hardest to make this phone not compete on the software front. And I only say this because it feels a lot like iOS now and looks a lot like iOS, but isn't as intuitive as you would expect it to be. And it now has separate notification shades and control centers instead of having it all in one place, and I think that is a bit of a letdown. There's no denying that this is potentially the best camera you can get on any phone anywhere in the world right now. And converting the price from yen to dollar, it starts at just under $900 for the 256GB model, which I don't think is that bad. And if you do manage to get hold of one of these though, if you're outside of China and you're worried, oh, will Google Apps work, then they should be absolutely fine. However, if you wanted to use Android Auto, there's a chance that this wouldn't work, so just be careful with that. What are your thoughts though on the Vivo X100 Ultra? It seems like it's miles ahead when you have a look at pure camera hardware, but let me know in the comments what are your thoughts on this. I'm genuinely curious, could like a powerhouse camera phone take you away from what you have already, even if the software isn't quite up to scratch? Before you head off, make sure you subscribe to the Android Authority YouTube channel, and if you do that, then I'll see you in the next video.